Hi there, I'm Suparna Goswami. I'm Associate Editor with Information Security Media Group. I welcome you all to today's webinar in partnership with JFrog titled DevSecOps Unlocked, Fortify Your Software Supply Chain. Now, in this webinar, we will reflect on the key lessons from 2024 and showcase how DevSecOps champs are leading the way in securing DevOps pipeline for 2025 and beyond. Today, we will uncover real-world insights, explore actionable strategies, and demonstrate innovations designed to safeguard your software delivery lifecycle in an evolving threat landscape. Now, this is more than a discussion. It is your roadmap to fortify your software supply chain and advancing your DevSecOps strategy for the year ahead. Please join me to welcome Yashasvi Mudumbai, who is Senior Director of Solutions Engineering with JFrog, and Srinivasan Santhanam, who is Senior Principal Technologist, Singapore Airlines. But before I bring them in, please allow me to give a quick background about ISMG. Now, ISMG is the world's largest B2B online education platform, which is focused on information security and information security and cybersecurity, and it has expanded its coverage to technology as well. We currently publish more than 24 sites with more than 950,000 members registered on our websites. We have created a true resource for cybersecurity professionals out there. Some quick housekeeping items. If anyone should experience any technical issues while viewing this webinar, please email on the ID displayed on your screen. In addition, please note that the content being presented in today's webinar is copyrighted material and is meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you or your institution would like to use this information presented in today's session, please contact us at the email ID given on below the screen. About our sponsor today, JFrog. JFrog is on a mission to create a world of software delivered without friction from developer to device. Driven by a liquid software vision, the JFrog software supply chain platform is a single system of record that powers organizations to build, manage, and distribute software quickly and securely, ensuring it is available, traceable, and tamper-proof. A quick background about our SMEs today. Yashasvi Mudumbai, as I said, he is Senior Director of Solutions Engineering with JFrog, and he's a cybersecurity leader and DevSecOps advocate dedicated to empowering organizations with robust solutions for a secure and efficient software delivery. Yashasvi plays a pivotal role in driving JFrog's mission to revolutionize software security and resiliency across the APAC region. Srinivasan specializes in enhancing software engineering capabilities, improving developer experience, and accelerating software delivery for enterprise. His areas of interest include generative AI-driven SDLC, DevSecOps, orchestration, security by design principles, test automation, code quality, system observability, and performance optimization. So now we will dive into the panel discussion. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email us. The stage, Yashasvi and Srinivasan. Let's explore the state of DevSecOps in ASEAN. Now, we want to understand the latest trends and regional perspectives that will help us navigate the challenges and opportunities. So, DevSecOps is critical for your modern software supply chain security. So, Yashasvi, maybe the first question to you, what are the key trends you think that have emerged in ASEAN over the past year?
Yeah, Suparna, nice meeting you. Nice meeting you, Srinivasan. To answer the question, what are the trends that have emerged in ASEAN over the past year? I would put that in three different buckets. From a trend perspective. And when I talk to a lot of CISOs and DevSecOps practitioners and leaders, shift left security comes first. Increased focus on open source security. And the third one is, regulatory push. When you look at shift left security, what organizations are actually looking at, what the leaders are actually looking at is, how do I ease out the pain for my developers when they are starting to develop the software right from the scratch? How do I make sure that during my entire SDLC process, security plays a key feature and making sure that vulnerabilities are even caught before the production. I have a few leaders who have said that even before the production, I would want to look at these vulnerabilities and threats even before it goes to the build stage, even before it passes the build stage. That shows the importance of having a shift left mindset and that also eases a lot of pains for the developer themselves, because they are artisans, right? And it's like, if you go through the build cycle, and what happens is, if they are bombarded with vulnerabilities, what happens over there is it becomes very, very difficult for them to keep up with their current projects and to deliver things on time. The second thing, when you look at the open source security, right? We all know that 85 to 90% of your code is open source, and 10 to 15% is your first party code. With such heavy reliance on open source components, it is extremely important to understand what are the threats that are being introduced to the environment, and making sure that these dependencies are scanned time over time, right? And of course, a regulatory push, it's extremely important to understand the lay of the land, understanding what are the regulatory compliances that my organization will have to adhere, or my project will have to adhere, and making sure that the policies are in place, and the adoption of these practices are well oiled within the entire DevSecOps practice.
Sure. So, Yashashvi said, Srinivasan, welcome to the discussion. First of all, thank you so much for joining. And like Yashashvi mentioned, that open source, threat, regulatory push, we usually hear these words in the same sentence. But what are you hearing from your peers? What is your personal experience as a practitioner in this space? What is that you have observed in the year 2024 in this space? How has it developed for you?
Okay. First of all, thank you everyone, and thank you, Suparna, for having me in this session. Uh, I think Yashashvi said a very important concept about shifting left, right? So that is what is one of the key drivers from security being a compliance thing. We are now trying to think about how to build in security into your whole life cycle process. So that is the mindset change that I see personally, as well as within the community as well. So uh, what does it mean, right? It means a lot of things are happening along the SDLC lifecycle chain, right from vulnerability scans, right from looking at how your application behaves at runtime. There are a number of different dimensions that I am seeing are getting enhanced with security built into this each of these stages as well. So no longer it's like the end of the cycle pen test and you get a report and developers go back and fix it. That's not happening, right? Then there are linting tools right at the IDE stage itself. Security kicks in right before even you write a single line of code. The moment you include a library, it is giving you a posture. So what I'm saying is then and there security. That's something. Continuous security, if you want to call it, like continuous integration, continuous delivery. Continuous security is something that I'm seeing, which is here to stay as well, right? There are also a couple of other things, notable shifts in the last couple of years that if you, or even in the last 4 5 years, if you have noticed, right? Ever since cloud and other platforms came in and infrastructure has been driven by code. Previously, we used to say, oh, okay, I'll do a code scan. When you say code scan is just whatever code that you have written, right? That was the application code. What we are now seeing is like, there's a lot more focus on scanning the infrastructure as code, your YAML configurations, your Kubernetes configuration, everything, to make sure that, there are no leaks, in the whole system processes or in the development lifecycle as well. That's also one trend that is a lot more focus around not just the code around your application, but wherever code is there, right? So that's one. And the last one, which probably many organizations are moving towards, right? We used to be like a perimeter based security, right? That's something that was quite common. If it is intranet, I trust anything in the intranet. Oh, I am happy. So there are two segregations, intranet and intranet. Now we are moving towards zero trust policy. What this means is I don't trust anything, whether it is next door or in my next track. I don't trust anything. So the zero trust is also driving a little bit of changes in terms of how we approach security along the whole life cycle. So these are some of the trends and practices that I see both in real life and I'm hearing taking shape as well.
Well, that's good to hear, Srinivasan. But Yashasvi, so Srinivasan mentioned about zero trust. He mentioned about security on the go. Uh, so anything else that you want to mention, emerging risks that you think ASEAN leaders should keep in mind for the year ahead? And the topics that he mentioned, zero trust, security on the go. Yes, we have been talking about it for a long time, but are you seeing being implemented now?
Yeah, great points from Srinivasan. Of course, yes, there are a lot of practices that are actually being implemented, right? So when we talk about the emerging risks, so we all see the AI ML models being introduced within the organization and within the process also, right? What type of risks or risk vectors that we are actually introducing within the organization is also one of the trends that's actually building up, right? And with that, AI driven attack vectors as well, right? So typically your AI poisoning your software supply chain. How do we start looking at it? That's one of the emerging risks that I notice. And of course the open source trust issues. When we talk about open source trust issues, it not only touches upon the security issues, it also touches upon the operational issues as well, right? So we all know that there are, from an open source perspective, you also have malicious package infiltration that happens. It's pretty simple to get in a malicious package within the environment if you are not sure what you are getting into your environment. With that, there are also issues where there could be a non-vulnerable package today, but I don't know who's managing that, right? So example, if the package, if the library has never been used or it's not been managed by the by the creator for, say, probably for 300 days, are you sure that you want to use the package? I don't know what's in that. And with regulatory tightening that's actually happening with more regulators bringing in a lot more policies, there are more fines, more stricter compliance expectations from the software providers itself. So these are three or four important trends that I actually see from an emerging risk perspective across the region.
Okay, so Yashashvi, I'll continue with you here. So, given the risk that you just spoke about, so what can organizations do to strengthen their DevSecOps? Let's dive into that. So, how do you think will machine learning enhance DevSecOps, and what are some practical use cases organizations can adopt?
It's a great question. So when you look at the role played by ML within the DevSecOps, even before we get into that, right? So most important is to understand how and what the ML model within the practice itself. How is that I bring it to the environment, right? Apart from ML helping on the DevSecOps process. Example, if I'm introducing ML models within my environment, how do I make sure that the ML models which I'm introducing within my environment does not have any type of threats that get tagged along with it, right? And to answer the question on how ML enhances DevSecOps, this is something where a lot of leaders are looking forward to, right? So it may not be readily available as a solution, but what I hear is how can ML help in providing a better context-aware prioritization? We all talk about threats, we all talk about vulnerabilities. If ML can determine if a vulnerable function is actually used in the code base to reduce noise, right? So that's something which we can actually expect. Second is, of course, in malware detection, ML can identify malicious packages in open source even before they are actually integrated. And from a predictive risk management perspective, leaders are also looking at ML models which can actually predict which dependency are likely to introduce vulnerabilities in the future. That enables a proactive mitigation strategy, and instead of having a reactive mitigation strategy. These are things which I actually notice from the fellow leaders.
Sure. So Srinivas and Yashashvi mentioned about being proactive and deploying ML to predict an attack or to predict a vulnerability, right? But I'm sure there have to be quality gates there as well, right? So what quality gates should organizations implement to ensure security throughout the software supply chain lifecycle?
Right. This is where security by design, comes into play, and it's very, very important, right? Each stage, you will have to implement or a number of different quality gates along this life cycle. Take for example, design phase. What can we do at the design phase, right? There are a couple of things you can do. Very important things. Threat modeling is a very standard practice. It doesn't look at the code, it doesn't look at anything. You can just look at a picture itself and then try to figure out, whether this architecture, is going to have some vulnerability, or the touch points that are flowing in and out is having, any weak links, etc. So the architecture views, threat modeling exercises, these have to be done, right? When it comes to the development or the coding phase, if you want to put it that way, uh, you can implement some controls. You cannot literally implement a quality gate at that stage, because the developers have their own workstations, etc. What you can do is you can implement some controls. For example, right? Uh, all these open source things are downloaded from a public repository, one or more public repositories, right from Maven to MongoDB. You have tons of them. So what can you do? You probably can do two things, right? You can proxy them via a central source, and you can define some central rules and say, okay, if this is vulnerable, block the download. So the developers don't even get that, right? So you'll have to block the developers from directly going to the public repos, go via this proxy, right? So that is a mechanism. The other mechanism is also curated repos. So there are some vendors who are providing this curated repos. So you redirect them to that vetted. So that is something you can do at the developer stage. That is a control. The other thing is not a control, but as an enhancing function for security is you give them the linting tools, right? You have the security tools which scans the code, which will scan inline as well. So the moment you write the code, it will highlight, oh, this is going to be subjected to, let's say, for example, some SQL injection vulnerability, the way they form the SQL and things like that. So you have to provide at that level. So it is not a quality gate, but it's a control under recommended practice that you can implement. But when it comes to the pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline, that is where bulk of the quality gates will go in. That is where you, as a central organization, have the full control. What the developers check in, right? So when the developers check in a code, you will have to run a couple of different things. The first thing is a SAS scan, which is static application security, right? You scan the code and see how the code is structured, whether there are any leaks, the vulnerabilities, whether there are any hard-coded secrets people have put in the API key. Very common, although seems strange that I'm mentioning this, but it is not uncommon to find all these things. So you pick up all this, fail the build then and there, right? That's one part. If that passes, the next stage is what you can do is the OSS scan, which literally is stripping down the application, see what all it is having, like an ingredients of let's say a ketchup, right? So you just strip it down and start checking one by one, right? This is where the SCA or software composition analysis comes into picture, and a quality gate has to be there. If you find any libraries vulnerable, or you can define what is the vulnerability. For example, I will not tolerate anything CV greater than 7. You can define that, and you can block such things. Of course, there has to be a whitelisting and other, because as we mentioned, the library could be vulnerable, but what functionality you are using in the library may not expose the tricks to you. So, but nevertheless, you stop there, because that gives you a point to review whether it is safe to go or not safe to go, right? So once you done all that, right? Of course, DAST still cannot be integrated into the CI/CD, because there are no fast DAST that is available in the market that can complete within few minutes. Even if it does, it's probably not going to be effective, right? So these quality gates have to be done outside of your pipeline, but there has to be a quality gate. So if you cannot release the software unless you pass the IAST or DAST kind of a test, right? So those reports come in, and you can review the vulnerability reports, and you can the fixes are being recommended by the tools as well these days. So go with that. For very critical application, pen test could be a quality gate as well. You have to clear the pen test before you can go live. That's one thing. And before even do all this, right, I was also mentioning that the infrastructure code is also very, very vital. You need to start to look at you scan the configurations as well, not only the code. How is the configuration? Does it expose you to get some super rights and do some things, etc. So these are some of the things you do pre go live, right? Post go live also, you should have some gates. You should have continuous monitoring to see what is, because why is important is what is not vulnerable today can be vulnerable tomorrow if somebody finds something that as well, right? So you should have a mechanism. You should scan your servers and software every day to see how is the posture as well. And it's not a quality gate again, but it's a control you should have post go live as well.
Sure. And one more question, since we are in this topic of vulnerability management, how does one prioritize? Because there are so many vulnerabilities that come every day, right? Every minute, every hour. So how do you prioritize fixing which one first to mitigate the most critical risks?
Fantastic question. Very difficult, easier to answer, but very difficult to put that into practice. The reason being, if you look at 2024, 40,000 CVEs have been identified in that year. It's mind-boggling, right? 40,000 vulnerabilities have been identified. So what do I do? Like, do I just go and look at everything, break my head? What happens if you do that, right? Then you will not develop or deliver any value-added features. You only be fixing your vulnerabilities day in and day out, right? And you will never be able to catch up with that as well. So the only strategy that could work is something like a risk-based strategy. And what is risk is different to different organizations. But I can give you some pointers as to like how you can approach this, right? Anything that is kind of a day zero or a very critical vulnerability with active exploitation going on, and people have put in code, a sample code to say, hey, this is how you would go ahead and exploit this thing. By all means, jump in and start fixing like log4j and those things, right? Go and just jump and identify all the applications that are using this. Go and fix that. That's number one in the list, right? Second thing, all organizations might have some external facing applications and internal facing, like like a B2E kind of an application. So if you want to prioritize, go for B2C, B2B kind of applications to start with. That is exposed over the internet, and that carries more risk as well, right? Again, even if it's an internet application, if it is hosting PI data is very critical for you, go ahead and just approach that as well, because the leak that can happen or the impact of the leak could be very disastrous to the organization as well, right? So that's also very, very important. In terms of the vulnerability prioritization, if you just take a CV approach, it may or may not work. The reason I'm saying is, there is a concept called chained vulnerability, meaning like two low vulnerabilities or multiple low and medium vulnerabilities can be exploited to create a very big vulnerability. Those are examples that are there in the past where people have taken control of the server. Each vulnerability by itself is not so high or critical, but when combined in a combination, they will be very disastrous as well. So watch out for this chained vulnerabilities. So that's one thing. And the last thing is just stay tuned. Every day, just look at you subscribe to some reports and other things. Make sure that you are on top of what is happening. In terms of the vulnerabilities that are being published. For example, NIST database is something that is there, or there are commercial databases where people publish their own research, etc. So please do stay on top of it to continuously assess the risk and prioritize.
Yeah, it's not an easy job.
No.
But Yashasvi, as Srinivasan mentioned, we don't really have to. You can't really completely rely on the CVE score,
Correct.
right? So, what red flags should security teams watch out for to identify potential threats?
So when you, just to add to a few points which Srinivasan mentioned, right? So when you look at prioritization of vulnerabilities, it's also important to understand, whether the particular library has ever been called, right? So when you throw a report back to the developer saying that, I have found these many issues in the code that you wrote, or probably this project, how should I start looking at it? Should I start looking at it from an exploit perspective, as Srinivasan mentioned? Should I just look from a CVSS portal value, or can I also use a mix of that and understand whether this package has ever been called, right? Or whether this library has ever been called within the environment, and not just that, also to understand, is there an alternate fix that is even possible, instead of just going ahead and fixing a version or upgrading a version which can actually break the build? Can I go ahead and can I just go ahead and say that, can I have an alternate fix that is that is available, right? So that's something which I would like to add upon. And to come back to your question, Suparna, can you just please repeat that question, please?
Yeah, so if there is no CVE score available, what are the red flags one should keep in mind?
Yes.
Noted.
So to add on that, there are scenarios where as we have spoken earlier, there are chances where a package is not vulnerable today, may be vulnerable at some point in time, right? So how do I start identifying that? That's one of the things, right? And if I further break it down, right, even during your entire SDLC lifecycle, do I notice any type of unusual behavior? Are there any unexpected changes in the artifact metadata or the usage patterns? Are there any type of unsigned or unverified binaries that are actually running? So how do I start looking at it? How do I start quantifying that? Right. So what are the different types of packages that are being used? Are they from an untrusted, unverified repositories? Do I even know what I'm actually looking at? And of course, from a rarely used or recently published packages with no reputation. These are typical, red flags that I will actually be looking at, because these rarely used or recently published packages with no reputation, I don't even know who has published it, when it was actually published, how old is it, or how new is it, right? How do I validate it? It could be, that could be a backdoor that is, attached within the code. I don't know that, right? So those are things which I will actually be looking at. And of course, where am I downloading from my, OSS packages, right? So how, can I actually verify it? Or do I have a mechanism where I have a curated repository, as Srinivasan mentioned earlier, right? So that I can actually validate these packages, these version, numbers, and so on and so forth, so that I don't get from an untrusted resource, or I don't get spoofed with a kind of a shadowed name, maybe just a spelling mistake within the package name. I've seen that as well, right? So these are things which I would look at as a red flag, even though these packages does not have a CV, this does not have a vulnerability as on today.
Yeah, so as I said before, there are too many things that one has to keep in mind. And on top of it, moving to our next phase of discussion, regulations, compliance, that's another challenge altogether. And we have SBOM, software bills of material. And I'm sure our listeners would love to discuss more on this. So, Srinivasan, let me start with you here as we move to this part of discussion. So, how should organizations approach SBOM implementation? It's a very good concept on paper, but practically, what are the challenges? What are the key elements that should be included in vendor contracts and obligations?
Yeah, very good question as well. So let me answer this in two parts. First, for the software that you are creating, right, you have the full control, right? It's because you are putting it the software through the CI/CD process. So you should be able to strip it up or strip it down to the lowest possible and see what are the libraries that are included. And those hints are already there, like in the package.json or form files. All those information is available there. So for definitely for internal software, when you are building in the pipelines, it's very important to understand what the composition of that software, and you start to not only just build the artifact, but you start building the SBOM, which is, as you said, right, software bill of materials along with it as well, because this will be the vital piece of information that will be very helpful when you want to monitor in real time, in future, even if there's no vulnerability today, right? So that's for internal software, just get it as part of the CI/CD pipeline, get it stored as part of the artifact itself. So we know that this is the commit that got created, this is the build that ran, this is the artifact this got produced, and this is the composition of the artifact as well. So you have the traceability and the integrity of that maintained as well. That's something you can do. What is a little bit difficult is for the vendor software, right? So if you look at it, right, I've spoken to some of the vendors who are still reluctant to give me their SBOMs. They don't. We said as a policy we don't share the SBOMs. Okay, but you cannot say that to if you are selling software to the U.S. government or the Defense Department, because that is mandated after the, I think, the SolarWinds attack. The U.S. government mandated that any software that somebody is selling to the government should have SBOM, and so we can take that approach, but it's no, we don't have that the power or the capacity to do that. But it's a good thing to have to have the discussion with your vendor. So generally they'll give you the software. At best they'll give you a help guide that goes along with it. But what we want to ask is, okay, give me what goes into the software as well, right? So this is where SBOM comes in. When you want to plan for such a thing, right? You should have a store mechanism. Either you are able to generate the SBOM as part of the build process, or if external people are able to give you the SBOM, you should be able to import, because all this is part of your overall inventory, right? So one of the things that you can look at, again, it doesn't cost a lot of money. OWASP has got the dependency track. You can just download and put it and just start uploading the SBOMs. Of course, there are commercial tools which also do very similar capabilities. So that's something that should, since you mentioned about vendor contract as well, right? Probably if you want to include that as part of the vendor obligations, you can say, look, you need to supply SBOM as part of, the software process, and it doesn't stop there. Of course, you will have to decide on that, because SBOM has a couple of different formats, like, SPDX, CycloneDX is one I personally like. So if I'm writing the contract, I would put that, I want the file in this format, right? Again, there could be a number of different things that could be included in the SBOM, as well as attributes, right? So what is the component? What is the version? What is the license? If there are known vulnerabilities, I want to know as well. So put the obligation back to the vendor. Not only give me just an SBOM, but give me all known vulnerabilities that are there in these components as part of this as well. And it's just not a one-time job, right? So that is something that you have to include these clauses in the vendor contracts as well. You will have to hold them accountable throughout the life cycle of the software. So if they are giving any updates, upgrades, ask them for upgraded SBOM as well. And you also put it in such a way that that they have to be very truthful. They have to declare exactly what is there. They don't give you some SBOM which doesn't match with what the artifact that you are going to deploy, etc., right? So those kind of clauses you may want to just include as well. Okay, having that SBOM is one thing, right? Then you probably come to, okay, if I find a vulnerability, what is their obligation? So you might have to have some SLAs with them. If I find day zero vulnerability, I will monitor the SBOM. If I find something, either you disclose and give me a patch, or I will come back to you and you have to give me a patch within, let's say, 24 hours or 48 hours, and things like that, right? So those are some of the things. And last, but not the least, which is also very important, is sometimes vendors themselves include some other packages or subcontract. They subcontract certain portions of it and then assemble and give it to you. So what are the rights and obligations, right? So you have to be very careful. So even if it is subcontracted, you make sure that some party is ultimately responsible for disclosing what is there inside the software and who will fix in what time frames, etc. So these are some of the things that will help you manage the supply chain effectively.
Sure. Yashasvi, I'll give you a chance to speak here. You were smiling when you mentioned that vendors are reluctant to share the details. So yes, what would you like to add here?
Yeah, I would say that SBOM isn't just a compliance checkbox. It's an operational necessity to manage risk effectively, right? So for vendor contract elements, I would like Srinivasan mentioned, it should also be real time. It should be complete, and it should be continuously updated. And the vendor context must include, software components transparency, right? So what are the components in full disclosure, disclosure of dependencies as well. If there are going to be any transitive dependencies, go ahead and mention that as well. Continuous risk assessment. It's not just about the procurement, but the ongoing security monitoring, as Srinivasan mentioned. So there should always be a way to go ahead and say that for the ongoing security monitoring, who's going to be responsible, and can I get all of this in an exportable format, maybe in a CycloneDX format, right? And from a incident response collaboration, defining a security obligation with vendor, right? So for vendors. And we all know that, on day one, you can never commit saying that this package which I'm using will never be vulnerable in the future. But if there are cases, how do I fix it? Who should be responsible? and what are the obligations that should be a part, saying that, if a vendor is supplying a software, and how, in case of in case of emergency, I would put it that way, how is the incident response collaboration that's going to happen? So all of that should be a part of it.
Sure. So in terms of, let's just concentrate on Singapore here. So what are the specific software supply security regulations in Singapore? And how do they compare with broader ASEAN regulatory landscape?
Okay, ASEAN is a large landmass. But when it comes to Singapore, I can cover a few things. Singapore regulations are more sector specific. For example, banking and finance is one of the major areas here. So there is this Monetary Authority of Singapore (MAS), which literally guides in terms of how software should be delivered, and what are the security standards that need to adhere to, etc. Right? So it's very sector specific, and even some of the countries are moving towards that direction as well. They are, because each sector could have different set of requirements. So that's one part. The approach from Singapore generally is very prescriptive. I'm not sure about other regions. So they tend to literally put down, what are the things and how you can comply and what you need to comply with, etc. Rather than, in most cases, I see that in some cases it is broad set of guidelines. In most cases, it is very prescriptive as well. So Singapore, like GDP, like the data protection policy as PDPA. So that is something maybe it's different in Europe and slightly different in US. It's little stringent in Europe, I would guess. So you have that because that will also impact what kind of measures you need to take, what kind of security ring fencing that you need to do for your systems, etc. So those are some of the guidelines. The other thing I've noticed with respect to the Singapore regulation is that it is more closely aligned to international regulations and standards. For example, the ISO or the NIST, right? So their frameworks and recommendations are more closely aligned to that as well. Singapore has got, it's called GovTech, where, it's a technology organization that manages, all the aspects of, the government agencies. So there is also a cyber security agency, CSA. I think few years back they released, their cyber security strategy. It's a little bit a long document, but if you go through it, it has got all aspects of it, right? Every piece of it, is covered in terms of, how do we secure that, and what are the recommendations, and how do we plan for future, etc. Right? With respect to open source software, I think Singapore has some guidelines, not so prescriptive in that sense for OSS, but it has got some guidelines as well, for to kind of regulate the usage. So these are some of the things, I personally see from this market.
Sure. And Yashasvi, I'm sure you are also hearing from, you interact with a lot of people across industries, companies. So regulations is, of course, one of the top considerations or factors that probably, give them nightmares. So what are the diverse, how are they managing the diverse regulations across ASEAN, and how are other countries? Yes, we know Singapore is probably leading, but what about other countries? How when it comes to their regulatory environment, how mature are they?
Yeah. This is again, a question that cannot be actually answered or cannot be practiced, with immediate effect, because what I notice is when you talk about regulations, there are certain, regulations which are extremely descriptive, as Srinivasan mentioned, and there are certain regulations which says that, I would want, probably a SaaS that should be available, or DAS that should be available. What are the different checks that are actually doing? What happens over there in certain regulations, when you have multiple product lines within the organization, it becomes extremely difficult for people to get reports from everywhere, understanding what are these regulations, how do I translate that into technology terms, and what are the checks and balances that I should have. And what I notice as a trend, and I wouldn't call it as a trend, but a serious analysis, talking to a lot of CIOs and CISOs, we notice a unified platform adoption that is actually happening, so that it becomes much more easier and consistent to adopt and implement the different compliances which they need to be regulated, or the regulatory compliance which they need to adhere. That helps the organizations to stay agile. So which means that if there is a regulation that gets updated, they don't have to look at 4 or 5 different siloed solutions. Rather, go with a consistent unified platform, which helps them to regulate and update their policy and align with all the evolving regulations as well. If you have a unified platform, it also helps in leverage automation as well. How do I automate my compliance checks in order to reduce manual effort and the errors that are attached to it? And how do I also use cross-culture collaboration within different teams internally, and also work with the local regulators and my compliance officers in order to make sure that I comply with the regulatory requirements on time. That's also a time-bound requirement. Two, how do I make sure that I reduce the errors, as a part of it? And the three is, how do I also make sure that I contact every other team within my organization and make sure that the collaboration happens as well. So this is exactly what I'm looking at and what I'm hearing, from the CIO desks.
Fantastic, Yashasvi. As we approach now towards the end of the discussion, I would want to focus on the resiliency and the mature DevSecOps strategy. So, Yashasvi, quickly, if you could let us know that how can organizations in ASEAN, and I'm sure it would be true for uh, organizations outside ASEAN as well, build resiliency and advance the DevSecOps maturity, and how can leaders know or understand their DevSecOps maturity curve? Is there something that they can, look into that? Okay, I'm here today. Tomorrow I have to reach there. So, is there a curve there that they can understand that maturity curve?
Yes. This is a very interesting topic, right? So understanding, the maturity curve, where did I start? 6 months down the line, how do I make sure that I deliver the results and make sure that the process is actually mature? Because the process is ever evolving. And maturity, it's not just about tools, it's about the culture and process as well. And if I look at, key indicators, the most important indicator which comes out is how early security is integrated, right? So how do I make sure that I have security integrated much early in the process in the SDLC lifecycle, which also helps to provide a better software supply chain, or how to secure my software supply chain, and making sure that it is introduced early is one of the key factors. Level of automation in security policies, manual versus automated enforcement. How do I make sure that I automate all of these security policies? And we all talk about speed, right? How fast, or how frequently do I churn the latest versions to my customers or my internal customers? In that manner, should I concentrate on speed, or else can I have a security trade-off? Can the team ship fast without sacrificing security? So if I measure that, that gives a better way, that gives me a better way of understanding what is my maturity curve. And there are few other things which actually come into these practices. How early it is integrated within my pipeline. When we talk about starting left, it also talks about how early in the pipeline I actually integrate. Do I have a real-time visibility into our artifacts and dependencies which are actually brought in? How do I automate security and compliance check? And how can we respond to remediate vulnerability? It's about MTTD and MTTR, mean time to detect and mean time to respond. So if I'm able to measure all of this, then which means that I will also be able to, have a proper maturity curve that gives me better results, and it is quantifiable as well.
Sure. Thank you, Yashasvi. So, Srinivasan, as somebody who has been part of the industry for a long time, what strategies have proved effective for you in addressing supply chain security challenges? And to conclude, I would like to ask both of you, what are the top three action ISA decision makers must prioritize to build a resilient software supply chain in this year, 2025 and beyond?
Okay. Right. I think we discussed a lot in this session. If you want to condense that and prioritize or put it in the order of priority, right? Let's not talk about SDLC anymore. Let's talk about SSLD, right? SSDLC, sorry. So that is secure software development lifecycle, right? So that is something that should be a second nature to the organizations, right? So it's like this, right? It's the difference between baking in quality versus checking the quality of the product, right? So that is, so you will have to bake in security. The continuous security is the first thing. I think we did talk about various phases what all you can do. By all means, just start engaging and start having those checks and balances in your life cycle, right? I think my colleague Shashvi also talked a lot about the OSS, the transparency. 80-90% of your code base directly comes from open source software, right? So when we talk about supply chain risk, that is one of the weakest links, and that you need to just be very aware of, right? So yeah, be mindful. Have some curated repos, or have some checks and balances, what all is acceptable, not acceptable to be included in your software before you even build them. So those kind of rules and regulations within the organization, or policies within the organization, will be very be useful, right? Third is also, when you talk about supply chain, right, you should have that artifact traceability. Not only that, the composition of the artifact that you should know, you should also know how the artifact got into that in the first place, which means right from code to your build process to your artifact should be traceable. So I should know, this is the developer who committed this code, this is the pipeline that ran, and this is the artifact that got produced, and this is the SBOM associated with the artifact. So if you maintain that integrity, and you should stamp your artifact also along certain things, like checksum by default, you might be able to do that, because that is what helps you to really see if the artifact has been tinkered or not. There are other things that you can check. For example, if you have the created date, last updated date, you may want to just go back and check whether that matches with the last pipeline that it ran, or it has been tampered with, etc. Right? So there are a number of other things that you can do if you have a good artifact management. A number of different things you can do to ensure that it is not being tampered along the life cycle as well. So those are all before go live, right? So as I said, post go live, it's mandatory that we monitor, either by SBOMs or any other means, doesn't matter. But you should know the security posture of your organization at any point in time, any point in day as well. Irrespective of what vulnerabilities are getting detected, etc., and exploited, you should know this, the risk posture of it. To that extent, you should have your processes in such a way that you are able to either generate reports or generate the state of your organization in a very short period of time, and respond to threats as well. Last one thing that I wanted to mention, which is very often overlooked, which is also one of the key factors in introducing leaks, is developer education, right? I have not seen a lot of organization which mandates that every developer has to go through a security course, or be certified in certain security aspects, etc. Right? There are lots of platforms which gamify this, so that's also something organizational leaders have to focus. It's not a responsibility of the infosec department, right? Security is everybody's responsibility, right? And especially so for the developers who are creating that piece of software that is going to be vital for your business. So please also get them trained, on the latest security part. Keep training them on an ongoing basis as well. So these are some of the things I think could help you mitigate, some of this supply chain risks.
Sure, that's a good point that you mentioned, that keep training your developers, because security is not just a responsibility of the infosec team. It's actually entire business which need to be trained on security. But Yashasvi, just to conclude, what would be your top three action items to build a resilient software supply chain in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah. I will quickly, cover that. Starting my most favorite topic, leverage real-time, security intelligence, making sure that you stay ahead of evolving threats and also figure out, ways to prioritize what needs to be fixed first. Enforce binary integrity at scale, making sure that what's being built and what's being, deployed. Zero trust software pipeline, no verified package should enter, production. And one most important thumb rule is collaboration across dev, sec, and ops, right? Making sure that you break silos for continuous security. These are a few things which I would put across.
Thank you, Yashasvi, and thank you, Srinivasa. On that lovely note, let's end the conversation. I'm sure our audience has been able to take something back from this webinar. Thank you so much for sharing your views.
Thank you.
To our audience, thank you for taking time out for this webinar. Hope you have been able to gain some valuable insights. I look forward to seeing you in one of future events again. Thank you.